Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog for the first time and the last time during the WTA Finals because it's time to preview the final. The week's gone quickly. It's also been combined with the Paris Masters on the ATP side, so if you've been following both, as I have, you've probably been struggling for time across both. But here we are. It is the last two players remaining in Shenzhen. Ashleigh Barty, the top seed, against the defending champion and number 8 seed, Elina Svitolina. So, as short and sweet as I can, and we know I struggle sometimes, I'm going to preview and predict this match. This could be the saving grace of the tournament. Shenzhen had, in its first year in Shenzhen, the WTA Finals had, I thought, a really promising lineup, and probably probably the most level field at a WTA Finals in recent times. When the groups were split up, they looked fairly even when you weighed up the players in each one. But both alternates were called into play, so that would be Kiki Bertens and Sophia Kenin, because Serena Williams didn't even make the trip. So we're going a fair bit down the rankings there than what you would expect at the WTA Finals. And injuries have just been rife. We've had one withdrawal from Naomi Osaka and 3 retirements from Bianca Andreescu and Kiki Bertens after she'd come in as an alternate in the round robin stage, and then another one from Belinda Bencic in the semis. So what started out really promising has kind of turned into carnage. So it's up to Barty and Svitolina to save the day. And based on the way they performed in the semi-finals and looking at their past head-to-head, I think it's possible they can do just that. And it's not to say there haven't been some great matches at the WTA Finals. There have been some real battles, and probably some of the standout contests of the year as a whole have happened here in Shenzhen. But the injuries and the controversy surrounding the speed of the court and what it's doing to the players' bodies has kind of overshadowed that. So it's up to the final to leave a sweet taste in everyone's mouths, essentially. So no pressure, Barty and Svitolina. So the world number 1 in the final of the WTA Finals, I think for the first time since 2016, when Angelique Kerber made it. She didn't win the title. And Svitolina back in familiar territory because she won the event here last year for the biggest title of her career. She's going for her first title of the year. Actually, this is her first final of the year, which is kind of true WTA Finals style. I don't mean to be offensive or anything, but the winner of the WTA Finals generally isn't a player that's shone throughout the year. It's usually one of the players that has kind of squeaked into the final 8 and has been solid throughout the year, but has probably not won a slam and things like that. So Barty has a few statistics and things that she needs to overturn here if she's to come out on top, because of all the players on tour, as her ranking would suggest, Barty's had a standout year. It's been phenomenal for the Aussie. So where do we start? Let's start with the paths to the semi-finals. I'm just going to list the group stage results to save us time. I'm not really going to go into details, and also because I've been following Paris as well, I didn't actually watch every single group stage match, but I saw enough of what I needed to know where Barty and Svitolina are at in terms of form and in terms of how they're feeling on the courts right now. So Barty was in the group with Petra Kvitova, Belinda Bencic, and originally Naomi Osaka, but Osaka withdrew, giving place to Kiki Bertens. That was quite last minute. And Barty then actually went and lost that match to Bertens, but she won one match in 3 sets over Bencic, 5-7, 6-1, 6-2. That was her first match of the tournament. Then she lost to Bertens 3-6, 6-3, 3-6, 6-3, 6-4. Even reading scores is difficult at the moment. I'm not quite sure why. And then in her final match of the group stage, she beat Petra Kvitova, who she's had some incredible contests with this year, 6-4, 6-2. Which is interesting because we've had some long matches, and that's one that you thought might have gone the distance. But Barty capitalizing on very, very few first serves from Kvitova and then just kind of letting her unravel in the right places. So that was Barty into the semi-finals, as Svitolina made her way there by beating 3 opponents without dropping a set. So Svitolina pretty emphatic, and it's clear that of all the players in the draw at the WTA Finals, all 10 of them eventually, because we had the alternates, she's the most at home on this surface and in these conditions with the grittier, slower indoor hard court, which you wouldn't expect, especially at the back end of the season. And that's why it's been controversial, because it's very demanding on the bodies of the players. The rallies are extended as a result. And Svitolina, as she did when the tournament was elsewhere last year and the conditions were similar, has coped really well. So in her first match, she beat Karolina Pliskova, the number 2 seed, 7-6, 6-4. Marathon tiebreak, 14-12 in that first tiebreak. Then she took down Simona Halep, 7-5, 6-3. And then she dispatched Sofia Kenin, 7-5, 7-6. And yes, she didn't drop a set, but you can see she was pushed very close in some of those sets. Kenin, I believe, had set points in both of those sets that she lost. Pliskova obviously was right with her in that first set tiebreak. And even in the match where Halep went down, she didn't go down easy. So Svitolina into the semis without dropping a set, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. And then we had the semi-finals today, which I watched both of them, starting with the Svitolina-Bencic match. Interesting one, because this match wasn't completed. Bencic pulled the plug down 4-1 in the deciding set. She had cramps, and she'd been having cramps since the back end of the first set, which she managed to squeeze out, but you could see, I mean, she had tears in her eyes, and it's something that you think about more when you're down on the scoreboard, but she was definitely struggling, or she wouldn't have called it quits when there was big prize money on the line alongside everything else. And I mean, when you look at the prize money for this tournament at the moment, it kind of counts for something. It's pretty disgusting. And it's not just here, it's elsewhere at big events in tennis, and they need to sort themselves out and spread that money further down the ladder, but it is what it is, to stay on track. Svitolina, let's talk a bit about this semi-final, then we'll go on to Barty's semi-final against Pliskova. Just so happened to be the world numbers 1 and 2 because of positions in the groups moving into the semis. So Svitolina's match was seeds number 7 and 8 against each other. Bencic was 7, she was 8. From what I saw of that one, I think that Svitolina was a pretty 50-50 with Bencic for much of that clash. She didn't have the best attitude at times, but she had her coach on at the change of ends after the second set, and he was telling her to focus on herself and to look at what she was doing and to ignore Bencic, because it's very difficult, and I have to say this for Svitolina, it's very difficult when your opponent is injured or cramping, and it's dips and rises, so the cramp's not there all the time. Bencic was playing a more aggressive game because of the cramps, because she couldn't engage in as many as the longer rallies, and therefore Svitolina wasn't getting much of a rhythm. She didn't really know was going to come back at her. That made it difficult, that got in her head, that got her frustrated. And I mean, you can say that she did well to come through that because she's into the final and she managed to survive, but Bencic was not fully fit, and she did pull the plug in that third set. And honestly, I think there were moments of concern for Svitolina. She was still casting glances over the net and wasn't able to fully focus on just herself. There were moments of sheer brain freeze in that second set when the obvious thing to do was hit into the spaces because her opponent's cramping. You know, make her move. You've got to be cruel. And she seemed almost tightened up by the situation and the opportunity that was in front of her, and pushing the ball back to Bencic and just giving her some free points. But I think she was smart with her serving in the end. She racked up, I believe, over 10 aces, 16 in total. And part of that is due to Bencic not being able to put weight on different areas of her body and not being able to anticipate, but you know, it's still 16 aces. Svitolina has served well all tournament, and that definitely got us some free points in the third set. And the thing about Svitolina is she's just so consistent from the back of the court, and that's lethal to someone like Bencic, who's suffering physically and can't just rally all day. So Svitolina's ability to just keep her going cross court and eventually in the third set find those spaces, put her on the move, was in the end too much, and Bencic knew from that deficit she wasn't coming back. So fair play Svitolina into the final without having lost a match. She was the only player to come through the group stage unscathed. And I have to hand it to her because she's the defending champion. And if you're not named Serena Williams, you do not defend your WTA titles crown, WTA Finals crown even. So fair play, impressive, because it takes some focus to be able to do that against what have been arguably the best players of the year on the circuit. So well done, Svitolina. And then moving on to Barty's match with Karolina Pliskova, where she really looked in some trouble at times. When she was down a set, she got her coach Craig Tyser on, and she was having a little discussion about the speed of the court, and she said it was like the ball was sticking to the court and it wasn't moving. And it's another one of those things where in the heat of the moment, when you've not done too much wrong, to be fair, but you're down on the scoreboard, that sort of thing can start emphasizing itself in your mind and you become distracted. But thankfully for Barty, you know, she's a very down-to-earth girl surrounded by likewise down-to-earth people. And after that discussion at that changeover, which I think she gave Tyser some credit for immediately in her post-match interview, she was straight back to business. You know, she reset, she focused on just getting on with her own game. And the thing with Pliskova is even when she's zoning, there's always a chance, if you just kind of keep plugging away with your game plan and what you've been doing, that she can and will malfunction, because she's Pliskova. That's what she does. So Pliskova honestly just outplayed Barty in that first set. She likes the slower pace Pliskova. She's a dark horse on clay courts because as a tall player, moving around the court doesn't come quite as easy to her, and she likes that bit more time on the ball to line up for her winners. She was cracking winners off the forehand and backhand, stepping into the court, coming over the top of the bounce. And Barty, as great as she can be on the defensive and as well as she can slice those balls back into the court, just wasn't getting enough. And she did need to get in Pliskova's head a bit to come through. The reason those 6-2 and 6-3 sets look so straightforward is because she was serving well. She was serving very smartly. She was mixing it up, leaving Pliskova guessing. And because she was serving first, that put scoreboard pressure on Pliskova. So that's in Pliskova's head. And she's starting to get a bit frustrated. Pliskova was a bit more animated than she usually is. She was yelling a bit. The racket was flying a few times. And Barty was just very steady. And I think, honestly, that serve that got so many free points when she needed them in the back end of that match was absolutely crucial and key for Barty coming through. Pliskova didn't know where it was going. And therefore, if she got the ball back in play, Barty was on the front foot. And she wasn't faring as well in the longer rallies because of Pliskova having that fraction of extra time to get to the ball, and therefore she got Pliskova in the place she needed to and came through that one in 3 sets like Svitolina. So it is Barty Svitolina in the final, and their head-to-head actually suggests that one woman is favoured to come through this. Svitolina, in one of the more shocking WTA head-to-heads, leads their rivalry 5-0, which is one of those score lines, one of those heads-to-heads where you just sit there and wonder why. Because Barty is at the top of the rankings because she has all the tools, she has many layers to her game, she's someone that can trouble everyone. And for her not to have a single win against Svitolina, who is arguably a counterpuncher who can be aggressive when she needs to, and doesn't have the same depth in her game that Barty does, that's surprising, to be fair. And that's not to play down Svitolina in any way. She's never going to be a player that's, I don't know, aesthetically pleasing to watch or anything. She's a gritty player. She'll scrap out victories. It's not always about winning pretty, and fair play to her for that. But yeah, it is surprising, this head-to-head, and honestly, they've all been pretty recent meetings. So their first meeting came in the 2017 Fed Cup, and Svitolina won that one in 3 sets. 2017 Wimbledon in straight sets, but it was close, 7-5, 7-6. 2017 Beijing, 6-4, 6-2. Then they played in Miami 2018, 7-5, 7-5, 6-4 to Svitolina. And then in Indian Wells 2019, earlier this year, one of the absolute best matches of the season. Svitolina came through 7-6, 5-7, 6-4, winning that tiebreak 10-8. So Svitolina is 5 up in the head-to-head, but some of those meetings, such as the Fed Cup meeting and the most recent meeting in Indian Wells, really could have gone either way. And it was 1 or 2 points that decided that Indian Wells match. It was hours long, lengthy, grueling rallies, very demanding. And it was after that meeting in Indian Wells. Barty's had a great year from January, to be fair. And she's been performing well since the Australian Open, but it was in the very next tournament, the Miami Open, where she really made her breakthrough and won her maiden Premier Mandatory events. So you could say that these two haven't faced off since Barty really became the Ashleigh Barty that she is today, because since then Barty won Miami, she won her maiden Grand Slam at the French Open, she then went and won her very next tournament, a premier event on a completely contrasting surface in grass courts in Birmingham. So Barty's come on in leaps and bounds. What can I say about this then? It's interesting because at the outset of the tournament, based on recent WTA Finals champions, these two, neither of them is a player that you would necessarily have picked to win, because Barty's the top seed and Svitolina's the defending champion. And traditionally at the WTA Finals, it's a more unexpected winner. If Pliskova had come through and beaten Barty, I was going to predict her to beat Svitolina, because Pliskova is exactly the sort of player that wins this tournament. Hasn't won a Grand Slam, hasn't really won a notable title this year, but has consistently done well across the board, like Svitolina, who hasn't won a title but reached 2 Grand Slam semi-finals and 1 or 2 Premier Mandatory semi-finals. So at the end of the day, it's going to be an unusual WTA Finals champ, and it shouldn't be. It should be one of the best, but it's more strange, I think, than it would usually be. When I was thinking about this beforehand, my instinctive choice would have been to go with Svitolina, but I'm not sure that that's my gut instinct. I think it's more my head saying that based on statistics. The fact that she's 5 up in the head-to-head, the fact that she's taken to these conditions in Shenzhen more easily, the fact that of the two of these players, she comes closest to kind of fitting the profile of what a WTA Finals champion would look like. So it's really interesting to think about. Svitolina Barty will struggle with, I feel, because she is naturally a good fit for this surface, and she's relentless from the back of the court. And what Barty was struggling against Pliskova with was her sheer consistency. And Pliskova is not a player you think of and think she's super consistent, but when the ball keeps coming back as hard as it was coming back at Barty, that is difficult to deal with over an extended period of time. And the conditions of these courts mean that matches are lasting for extended periods of time. So it is something that could cause Barty trouble. But Svitolina, at the end of the day, does not have the layers to her game that Barty has. She does not have the skill set and the variety that Barty has. And the one pro when it comes to their physical games, I think, for Svitolina, is that when she gets inside the baseline, she doesn't often lose the point. She's very confident moving into the court and finishing off. But I think Barty's going to be aware of that, and it's something that she's going to try and stop her doing. I think the way Barty problem solved against Pliskova was very impressive. And it's not all about her having to be completely on her own and keep a level head all the way through. She can get Craig Tyser on when she needs to. And yeah, I think just the way she never gave up for a single point and kept the scoreboard pressure on and then was applying the physical pressure was really impressive from Barty in that match. And Svitolina, while she was impressive in her own way against Bencic, for me didn't quite match that. So the thing I would say here is that Svitolina hasn't really faced a player quite like Barty coming into this match. And I think it probably would have done her good to do so. Obviously, the head-to-head strongly favours Svitolina, but it is surprising to me that Barty hasn't had more impact in that head-to-head. And I think if Barty is going to make a breakthrough in the head-to-head, which you would expect with a player of her talent, then it has to be now, because once a player hits the 6-love, 7-love mark on a head-to-head, they have your number, and it's going to be very, very difficult for you to make any further impact. It's not impossible for Barty to overturn this head-to-head at such a crucial point of the tournament. Skip back to 2017, Venus Williams, I think, was 7-love up in her head-to-head with Wozniacki and lost that match in straight sets. So it's definitely something that's been done before. And while my head was kind of saying the stats are favoring Svitolina going into this, like Miami, when I picked Barty to win in straight sets over Pliskova, and like the US Open, when I picked Andreescu to win over Serena, I'd be furious with myself if I hadn't backed Barty, who I believe to be the more complete player in this final, to win, and then she goes and wins it. I'd be mad with myself for not taking that risk, because she has all the skills, she has all the shots. She's already lost once at this event, which probably gave her the kick into action that she needed to keep going in the tournament and to improve. And yeah, she's got a good set of people around her. If she's going to make a move in this rivalry, it has to be now. And I don't want to say that Barty is the better player, because if you're going for someone that's a really gritty counterpuncher and consistent and good at turning the points around, Svitolina's great in that category, but Barty has so many more options, and Barty is definitely a player that I'm willing to back in this particular match. So in this final WTA clash of the season, I'm going to predict Ashleigh Barty to win the WTA Finals, and going with the theme of the tournament and there having been some really close contests, I'm going to call it to be Barty in 3 sets. And we'll just have to wait and see how that one plays out. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Please, when this stream is over, leave me a comment in the comments section. Let me know if you agree with my analysis, with my prediction. Let me know your own. You can even put game scores in there and we'll see who gets the closest. That would be fun. But I will be back later on this evening with the preview and predictions video for the Paris Masters final between Novak Djokovic and Denis Shapovalov. So keep an eye out for that. But thank you for watching this video, and until then, I will see you next time.